GLC is now offering a free audio stream of our 24/7 broadcast that we're calling GLC Radio, an online radio station that broadcasts our round-the-clock audio stream on a variety of platforms. GLC Radio gives you the ability to listen to GLC virtually anywhere, through your home or office computer, or on the go with a mobile device. You can access GLC Radio through our website or by searching for God's Learning Channel through iTunes Internet Radio, TuneInRadio.com, or on Shoutcast.com. Explore various GLC Radio-enabled mobile apps by visiting our website at glc.us.com/listen/GLC Radio. GLC Radio, your free connection to GLC anywhere, anytime.
Well, welcome to today's update. I'm glad I'm here with you today.
I'm glad you're here with me today, too. You know what? Dad was diagnosed with the flu yesterday.
I was sicker than I've been since I got saved. And thank you, Mrs. Scott, for getting me the stuff that made me look like a human again. And sorry, folks, I'm back again. Okay,
well, like I told you, I'm glad because I had to read your letter on Monday. And I do enough without having to read your letter. This is what I think.
You can read your letter.
No.
Yeah, you
Sure,
can.
why not?
I have a job again. Dear believers, we enjoy listening and watching what God is doing in the world through you at GLC. We are encouraged and challenged. Thank you, and may God continue to bless you and use you. Love you in Jesus, Janet, and Gaston in Roscoe, Texas. I hope I said that right, Gaston.
That's the French pronunciation.
Yes,
That's why I like
That's
it.
the trouble with having that guy
It's
talk
your-
French on the station.
And we got a message from Larry. Hi, Larry. That about Jean-Claude and his little French boots. He said, if I were wealthy, I would buy Jean-Claude some West Texas boots. Which is pretty funny.
I think Jean-Claude would probably like Texas boots.
Jean-Claude likes his little French boots. Yes, he does. And it doesn't matter what kind of boots he wears. That's what I'm going to call him.
That's right.
They're French because he's wearing them.
And he's a Frenchman.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, there is a prayer meeting every night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you are invited to join in. You can call 1-857-232-0156, and then the access number is 377054. I hope you've had time to write that information down.
If not, they can call the office and get it. We'll be sure to
Right.
give it to them.
And they ask you to call at least 15 minutes early so they can be ready to pray at 9. And now that's Eastern Time. So please note that the National Prayer Call continues every night with different leaders from different intercession ministries each night. And this call is sponsored by Breaker of Dawn. And it's been going on since September 9th, 2014. And every night is a Psalm 133 call with different ministries joining together. And most every night there are intercessors that represent our entire nation.
That's encouraging.
It is.
It is encouraging.
Yes.
And to know that everybody's invited. You know, you might want to just listen in. And that's probably all you'll be able to do. But it would be encouraging. And you'd learn how to pray.
But it makes
And
you one.
Be praying with one mind and one spirit.
And it will probably also make you aware of some issues that are going on that you're like
Not aware of.
aware of. It's like we try really hard to bring you issues that you don't know nothing about, but there's so much going on. In our first article, I know every one of you has probably heard about, and I'm just going to give you a lead in on this before I start out. Because when I got the news yesterday about the Jordanian pilot, needless to say, I was so grieved. I was already grieving for Japan. The world is now mourning for Japan because they've just lost two of their citizens. And then I heard this news, and I thought, I sat right here on this set, and I told you that just like 9/11, people are going to become numb to the beheadings. They're going to become very callous to it. The Islamic State realizes that. They're terrorists. They're in the business of terrorism, which means they're trying to shock and scare us so that we become immobilized with fear. So they waited, and then they burned someone alive. That actually happened a month ago. In fact, he was kidnapped on December the 26th. They burned him alive on January the 3rd. A week. A week. Only a week. They couldn't stand him because he was a Muslim who didn't believe what they believed. He was fighting against them, and he was part of the Jordanian Air Force,
which was working with the United States Air Force. So
here we go.
Whimmy.
Militants fighting for the Islamic State terror group in Syria and Iraq released a video on Tuesday which shows Jordanian pilot Maaz al-Kasabeh being burnt alive while locked in a cage. The video, which is ISIS's most sickening yet, begins by showing Kasabeh being paraded in front of heavily armed men wearing combat fatigues and yellow masks. The pilot's face looks swollen, heavily bruised, and bloody in places, no doubt from repeat beatings by the terrorist from the moment of his capture. The footage shows the airman wearing an orange jumpsuit. A trail of petrol leading up to the cage is seen being lit. Flames quickly spread to the cage where they completely engulf the helpless pilot in images that are far too distressing to publish.
The release of the horrific footage confirms rumors heard by anti-ISIS activists in early January that the pilot had already been killed by burning. Al-Kasabeh was kidnapped by the jihadists after his plane crashed close to their stronghold city of Raqqa in northeastern Syria on December 26th. Mr. Kasabeh was a first lieutenant in the Jordanian Air Force. He'd served for 6 years prior to his capture. He married just last July.
The shocking video came just days after ISIS British executioner Jihadi John savagely murdered Japanese journalist Kenji Goto in a filmed beheading that followed days of intensive negotiations through intermediaries to save him. Kenji Goto was the second Japanese citizen to be murdered by ISIS in January, which the Islamic State considers their retaliation against Japan for involvement counter to their goal of establishing an Islamic caliphate. But all Japan had done was contribute a couple of $100 million in humanitarian aid to countries fighting ISIS. Then the man who has come to be known as Jihadi John threatened death to every Japanese person on the planet as he prepared to slaughter Goto. As a result, a political scientist at the University of Tokyo told The Times, "The cruelty of the Islamic State has made Japan see a harsh new reality. We now realize we face the same dangers as other countries do. People in Japan are now calling Kenji Goto's murder their 9/11.
Well, this article comes from the AP and the Washington Post. Gray Patelho and Dana Ford with CNN reported that Jordan, in keeping with their promise, executed 2 al-Qaeda prisoners before dawn Wednesday, today, in response to the ISIS killing of the pilot al-Kasabeh, as the government spokesman said. The executions included Sajida al-Rishawa, the Iraqi would-be suicide bomber whose release ISIS had previously requested, and Zayed Karbouli, a former top aide to the deceased leader of the al-Qaeda in Iraq, Abu Musad al-Zakari. The executions come a day after video appeared showing the Jordanian military pilot being burned alive while confined in a cage. The spokesman for the Jordanian military said al-Qasibeh was assassinated on January 3rd, a full month prior to the release of the video. In both Amman and the pilot's hometown, crowds hit the streets calling for revenge. Tom Fuentes, a CNN law enforcement analyst, noted, "When was the last time you had a mob in a street of one of these Muslim countries that was not screaming death to America, but in fact screaming, 'Get revenge on ISIS'?"
In an exclusive article from the Washington Post, we're told, with time for negotiations running short, the U.S. and Iran are discussing a compromise that would let Iran keep much of its uranium enriching technology, but reduce its potential to make nuclear weapons, two diplomats told the Associated Press. Such a compromise could break the decade-long deadlock on attempts to limit Iranian activities that could be used to make such arms. Tehran refuses to meet U.S.-led demands for deep cuts in the number of centrifuges it uses to enrich uranium. The proposal could leave running most of the nearly 10,000 centrifuges Iran is operating, but reconfigure them to reduce the amount of enriched uranium they produce.
Experts warn that any reduction in centrifuge efficiency is reversible more quickly than a straight decrease in the number of machines, an argument that could be seized upon by powerful critics of the talks in the U.S. Congress. Washington demanded a year ago that Tehran reduce the number of operating centrifuges from 10,000 to fewer than 2,000. That would increase the time it would need to make enough weapon-grade uranium from a few months to a year or more. By November, when the talks were extended, diplomats said the U.S. and its partners were ready to accept as many as 4,500, but Iran had not significantly budged.
Well, the latest negotiations have been extended twice, strengthening skepticism from both hardliners in Iran and critics in U.S. Congress. Failure this time could result in a push for new sanctions by influential U.S. legislatures, a move that some Iranian officials warned would scuttle any future diplomatic attempts to end the standoff.
There's been an interesting development within the UN Human Rights Council regarding the inquiry into Israel's actions during the latest conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. William Shabazz, a Canadian law professor, resigned as chairman after Israel accused him of blatant conflict of interest for serving as a paid consultant to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which has direct ties to Hamas. On Tuesday, the UN Human Rights Council picked U.S. Judge Mary McGowan Davis, a former justice of New York State Supreme Court, and one of the two remaining panel members to take over as chairwoman following Shabazz's resignation. Barak Ravid with Haaretz News out of Israel tells us that as a result, the inquiry into the Gaza war is expected to be more balanced toward Israel.
Mary McGowan Davis was head of the HRC's committee that implemented the findings of the Goldstone fact-finding mission into Israel's operation in Gaza in 2009. Israel cooperated with her and provided substantial documentation regarding Israel's own inquiries into the operation. In her report, she found that, quote, Israel devoted substantial resources to investigating more than 400 complaints of improper behavior in Gaza, end quote, and that the Israeli investigations were conducted appropriately. Her report was one of the influences that caused Goldstone to later recant some of the conclusions of his investigation.
Yaakov Lapin with the Jerusalem Post has provided its readers with an update regarding Hamas's fast rebuilding of forces in Gaza. Hamas and allied terrorist organizations in Gaza have spent recent months intensively rebuilding their capabilities, which sustained significant damage during last summer's Gaza war. Their aim is to recover the military infrastructure that was damaged and return it to full capabilities and broaden it, according to a recent report by the Meir Amit Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center in Tel Aviv, founded by leading members of the Israeli intelligence community. To that end, Hamas has allocated the necessary funds, personnel, and equipment despite the shortages suffered by the civilian sector. We see that when it comes to military programs, resources flow without a problem, said Center Head Dr. Reuven Ehrlich.
And Avi Issacharoff from the Times of Israel has provided us with information regarding cooperation between Israeli and Palestinian Authority security forces against the Islamic State. Senior Palestinian sources said on Tuesday that PA security forces had detained 15 Palestinians in the West Bank in recent months for links to the Islamic State. They added that Shadi al-Mineh, a leader of Islamic State affiliate Ansar Beit al-Maqdis in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, has been hiding out in Gaza and is in contact with senior Hamas officials there, including Ayman Nofel, one of the commanders of Hamas's armed wing. PA officials said their security forces maintain close coordination with Israel on the subject of Islamic State in the West Bank. Israeli forces have also arrested several citizens in recent months for their involvement with the Islamic State.
French police are investigating a link between a man who attacked 3 French soldiers yesterday and the terrorist who killed 4 hostages at a kosher supermarket in Paris last month. 30-year-old Moussa Koulibaly was arrested after he attacked 3 French soldiers with a knife in Nice. Yesterday's attacker shared the same surname as Mehdi Koulibaly, the tourist behind the kosher supermarket siege on January 9th, leading anti-terror police to confirm they are investigating a link between the 2 men. Both Koulibalys are understood to have come from the African country of Mali. Mehdi Koulibaly boasted about being Islamic State warrior, while Moussa Koulibaly was known to police in Nice because of his record of theft and violence.
On Tuesday, Moussa made his way to a Jewish community center where, in an attempt to seek a reaction, he dropped a bag in front of 3 soldiers who were guarding the center as part of an anti-terror patrol. When one soldier reacted, Moussa pulled a large knife from the bag and stabbed the soldier in the face before attacking his comrades. 2 of the 3 soldiers were treated at the scene for light injuries, while the 3rd was taken to a nearby hospital. All 3 soldiers had been serving with the 54th Artillery Regiment and were armed with automatic rifles and machine guns.
Why didn't they shoot him?
It all happened too fast.
And there were soldiers, there were not security guards. They weren't trained for that type of position.
They might get some new training.
They might. What is the WSJ? Amy, do you know offhand?
The Wall Street Journal.
Okay, very good. That's who this article's from. For the very first time, hundreds of Iraqi Christian men are picking up rifles at a former U.S. military facility outside the city of Kirkuk, about 250 miles northwest of Baghdad. The men hope to form a fighting militia to challenge Islamic State militants who stormed the country last year. Fresh recruits to the new Iraqi Christian militia said their families were abandoned to militants by government forces last summer, and they seek to create a force that will keep their towns and villages safe even after Islamic State is defeated. Sunni neighbors in nearby villages, the recruiters said, supported the Sunni extremists of Islamic State as militants seized one Christian village after another in the Nineveh Plains, where Iraqi Christians and other minorities live. As Islamic State fighters advanced, Kurdish forces assigned to the region fled under attack, leaving vulnerable communities exposed.
Some 30,000 Christians have since fled the Nineveh Plains. Just one Christian town there, Al-Qush, and 3 smaller villages remain free. Across Iraq, more than 150,000 Christians have been displaced since Islamic State began its rampage according to Iraqi Christian community leaders. More than 2,000 men have signed up to fight, but it wasn't clear whether they could afford to train them all. Organizers hope the U.S. will help. As we've seen in the past 5 months, nobody will protect us, said a 21-year-old fighter. We don't want to repeat that, but we can't count on the protection of others, so we must control our towns ourselves. About 500 recruits, mostly Assyrians, will be trained this month, but it is uncertain who will fund and equip them in the long term. Without financial support from the Iraqi, Kurdish, or U.S. governments, the Christian militia has so far operated on donations, mostly from Assyrians abroad.
The U.S. National Defense Authorization Act, approved in December, names local security forces in Iraq as potential beneficiaries of as much as $1.6 billion to train and equip fighters against Islamic State. Those funds should support local forces that are committed to protecting highly vulnerable ethnic and religious minority communities in the Nineveh Plain and elsewhere, said a statement accompanying the act. We need help from the international community to get heavy weapons to defend our land, said a 28-year-old fighter.
Iraqi Christians, particularly Chaldean Catholics of ethnic Assyrian origin, have long ties with U.S. lawmakers through its large expatriate community. Former Democratic Senator Carl Levin, who retired in December, helped include specific reference to the Nineveh area, which they hope will yield U.S. funding. U.S. officials familiar with the effort said the idea has been to include minority groups that could use assistance, especially after the siege of Yazidi families by Islamic State militants last summer in Iraq.
Local Christian politicians have tried for a decade to arm and train a Christian regional guard, but faced resistance from Iraqi authorities. While under attack by Islamic State's predecessor, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the Assyrian Christians got permission and funding for local watchmen, but never the armed militia they hoped for. This month, that will change. This is a fight to take back and come back to our land, said a parliamentarian with the Assyrian Democratic Movement, the political party leading the training. It's as though our roots of thousands of years have been pulled out of the ground.
Snubbed by the central government in Baghdad, party officials pressed their demands over the past weeks with Kurdistan Regional Government, whose semi-autonomous region in the north abuts the Nineveh Plains. The Kurds offered the training facility outside Kirkuk, a base once run by the U.S. military to train Kurdish regional guards. Mr. Abdullah, one of the Christian recruit leaders, was serving with the Peshmerga, the Kurdish regional force, in the Nineveh Plains when Islamic State seized the city of Mosul in June. Mr. Abdullah said when he heard that Peshmerga comrades had fled as Islamic State militants took Mosul, he recalled thinking, I wouldn't want to defend a place that isn't mine either. He quit the next day. Months later, Mr. Abdullah signed up for a Christian militia that served as a trial run for the current effort. About 100 local men took up arms last summer to guard villages still free from Islamic State. At the training camp outside Kirkuk, Mr. Abdullah joined other ranking militiamen to coach the recruits. They are excited, but they are nervous for sure, said Stephen Yosef, 21 years old, as rows of men awaited their first roll call. Most have never seen an Islamic State militant, he said, or fired a gun.
Christian community leaders said that as many as half of Iraq's Christians are estimated to have fled over the past decade, and a second wave is bound for Istanbul, Beirut, and Amman. Residents of the Nineveh Plains, home to such minority groups as Yazidis and ethnic Shabak, have for years felt vulnerable, living in the middle of a struggle between Iraqi and Kurdish authorities over control of the region. No one has protected the minorities, and no one will in the future, said an Assyrian party official who swapped his suit for military fatigues to oversee the first week of training. Every recruit will get a rifle, he said, though the ones used in training are lent by Kurdish camp authorities along with machine guns and mortars.
Several Americans were helping train the young men as well. They said they had served in the U.S. military and were volunteering through a nonprofit organization they declined to name. They wouldn't talk about their mission or background, saying they needed to protect their identities from the Islamic State. One 28-year-old American trainer said U.S. officials in Erbil were briefed on the Christian militia, but weren't involved. U.S. officials didn't respond to requests for comment. The Americans want to stay away from this because their view is if you train the Christians, you're starting some crazy religious war, he said. Well, ISIS beat you to it.
That's right.
So, tell you what, all you viewers out there in GLC land, time to call your senators and your congressmen and tell them you get behind that Christian militia in Iraq, the Iraqi Christian militia. You support them.
Amen. Because they
have to have funding.
They do. And the representatives have to have your voice because they are being bombarded by lobbyists.
Well, they already came up with the act. We told you about that in that article. And the act is to fund things like that. So we'll just help them, we'll just guide them a little bit and tell them you get behind these Iraqi Christian militia guys. Get after it and don't wait until ISIS comes in and slaughters them all.
Well, this is a horrible article. Something going on right here in the United States. This is from the LA Times. Law enforcement agencies in 17 states arrested nearly 600 people and rescued 68 victims of human trafficking during a sting in the lead up to Super Bowl. What number is that?
Sunday is good enough.
Yeah. As part of the National Day of John's sex trafficking sting, spearheaded by the Cook County, Illinois Sheriff's Office, police said that they captured hundreds of men and women attempting to hire prostitutes through websites such as internet, including Craigslist. Police also said they rescued dozens of women who said they had been forced into prostitution. Sex trafficking continues to destroy countless lives, and this broad national movement should send a strong message to prospective Johns that their hobby is much more than a victimless crime, Cook County Sheriff Thomas Dart said in a statement. It's particularly meaningful that this sting culminated on the day of the Super Bowl, which unfortunately has emerged as a prominent haven for sex trafficking. This year's sting took place from January 15th to February 1st, ending the day of the Super Bowl. Dart said 570 people were arrested on suspicion of soliciting prostitutes. More than 70% of those people were responding to advertisements for prostitution posted online, he said, adding that most of the ads were on internet. Police also arrested 23 people on suspicion of sex trafficking and rescued 68 victims of trafficking, including 14 juveniles, Dart said. In Phoenix, just miles from the site of Sunday's Super Bowl, police said they rescued several women who told law enforcement they had been brought to Arizona specifically to work as prostitutes near the game. In the Bay Area, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office and Oakland Police arrested 23 solicitation suspects, according to Dart's statement.
Well, good for them.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're busy doing that. I'm glad
Yes.
they rescued some victims. 68 is quite a few to rescue in that amount of time. So
It is.
sure hope you saw the program with Lonnie and Deidre last night.
Oh,
We're
me
getting
too.
calls and lots of response on that. And we love you. We will see you on Friday.
God bless.